Good morning, everybody. Hello,
Oh,
everybody. I'm hoping I can get this onto Facebook because last week I couldn't because they've changed Facebook. They have a new look to Facebook. And so hopefully this will work. Last week it did not. So
can you hear me, Mark?
yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, this works now. I have to use the old style Facebook, the new Facebook look or whatever. I have to go back to the old look in order to stream it. I don't know why. Well, actually, I'm not 100% sure. And and we are on Facebook. We are on Facebook. Yay. Yeah, the new Facebook look thing or whatever didn't made it so that I couldn't share it last week. And now I can. And maybe something I didn't know how to do, but I'm using the old way and it's working now. So I hope everyone's doing okay. Man, it is miserable out right now. I think everywhere in California.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, Mark. It's not so miserable.
Where is she? That's evil, Judith. Evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rabbi,
But
we
Marina.
can't leave your house today.
Yeah, you did?
We can't. Too much fog.
Oh, you can't. I thought you said you could.
No.
I'm like, I don't know, because I can't see past the end of the street. It's really bad.
Yeah, see, we're up higher. We're actually above all the fog.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's not just fog.
Smoke yesterday was horrible.
Yeah, so hopefully.
Judith, where are you?
Channel Islands Harbor.
On a boat.
Which harbor?
Channel Islands.
Oh, Channel Islands Harbor. Tough.
Yeah,
Tough.
that's
It's really a hard life.
Judith
It's a really hard life.
It's enjoying the yacht life right now.
It's too hot in Santa Clarita. Wine, wine, wine.
I know. Well, I have my first, as some of you know, I told some of you, I have my first wedding in, I don't know, I guess 6 months. Yeah, 6 months. It's up in Paso Robles.
You're getting married again?
I'm getting married. Yeah. It's for our current, one of our, actually, this is a wedding where, I've known this young man since he was a young man, and he's still young.
You did his bar mitzvah, right?
I officiated at his bar mitzvah years ago. It's Eve and Joe Rumley's son, Andrew, a really nice young guy. He's married a woman originally from Turkey, Turkish woman. Interesting. And it's up there, and it's the first, however they were able to do it, they were able to have a wedding. So I just hope everybody stays healthy and we those are the kind of events that you hear about people getting sick at. So I'm hoping Tracy's not going to go. Unfortunately, she's not going to risk infecting her. She is going to work now, so she doesn't want to risk infecting people at work, so she's not going to go to the wedding, but she's going to come up with me. So again, I don't know if this is getting back to normal, and my daughter went back to school today. My daughter Shira, downstairs, she's doing what every other kid was doing. She just did it 3 weeks later, because her school was supposed to try to go back to live in person learning. So they waited and waited. We tried to wait it out. And so she went back to school today. So she's downstairs. She's downstairs going to school.
He's working.
So she is working. Yeah. So everybody, I will tell you today, we're going to continue reading about the blessings that Jacob gives to his family. And it's the last 3 chapters of the book of Genesis. It's quite extensive if you think about it in the stories of in the totality of Genesis. It's 5-6% of the book of Genesis. So it's a pretty big, I mean, Genesis is 50 chapters. It's 3 chapters. It's not hard to figure out. It's about 6% of the book. So again, not to dwell on it, but it's a lot more than the creation story. It's a substantial part of the last cycle, the part of Jacob and his sons, which, as you can see, as we've been studying the Midrash now for months on it, is a huge part of the book of Genesis. It's obviously it's the last, it's 50% of Genesis is Jacob and his sons. And then this story in many ways is obviously pretty important because it focuses on family dynamics and to some extent kind of wraps up the book of Genesis in a way that I think really makes Genesis really an exceptional piece of literature I mean, obviously Genesis is part of the rest of the Bible. Genesis was never meant to be read by itself, but if you did read it by itself, you'd be left with a story of families and family dynamic from the very beginning. And I mean, almost if you didn't have the first chapter, if you didn't have the first chapter of the creation of the world, you could almost make the argument that it's less a theological story as much as it is about families and about people. And it's not like, I mean, obviously you have to read it with chapter 1 with the creation of the universe, but really after that, it's all about people and it's all about how they relate to each other. And while God is kind of a guiding force in it, it's really about how families deal with each other and with the basic, how do we live together, and where it all comes from, the psychology and the reality of living with other people. So let's take a look at Genesis today look, we're going to be reading it for another couple weeks, probably till the end of the year, which works out well. But it's kind of sad because it's an amazing book of the Bible, and the Midrash is amazing because it launches off of that. So it's sad when we kind of come to the end of it because then we're dealing with the Midrash kind of continues to make it about people and about some of the interesting, details about, I mean, because at the end of the day, Midrash really doesn't deal with God so much as it does with giving backstory about people and the stories. I mean, the Midrash doesn't try to psychoanalyze God. A little bit, but not most of it. Most of it is about people. And as we go into the other books of the Bible, it's doing great. It does great psychoanalysis and gives us richness of people, but it's in Genesis. So let's take a look at it. Last week we read about the blessings of Ephraim and Manasseh, the 2 sons of Joseph, and how Jacob blesses them and reverses the blessing. And we also read about, again, how Jacob, to some extent, blessing his grandsons was a fulfillment of his mission in the world, and what it was like for him to bless these Egyptian-born grandchildren. Because we have to assume that most of the other grandchildren, at least, the sons of Reuben and Shimon and Naphtali, and the rest of them are all born in the land of Israel, not Ephraim and Manasseh. We know for a fact they're born in Egypt. So let's read about the next thing, which is Jacob blessing his children. So first he blesses his grandchildren in the Torah, then he blesses the rest of his children. So again, Ephraim and Manasseh are kind of put at the front, and then the rest of them. So that's what we're going to read about. And that is what we're going to read about right away. What was the consequence of Jacob blessing them? So Rosemary, do you want to start?
The blessings of the 12 tribes. When Joseph and his 2 sons left Jacob, his brothers, envious of the bountiful blessings bestowed upon the 3, said, "The whole world loves a favorite of fortune, and our father has blessed Joseph thus because he is a ruler of men." Then spoke Jacob, "They that seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. I have blessings enough for all."
Yeah, so the brothers start off, they're not happy. Even though they know from years and years ago that Joseph is going to get blessed at the front, even though they've come to Egypt as essentially as his servants, they're still, at least according to the Midrash, not happy about it. The Torah doesn't really tell us that. It doesn't tell us what their feelings were at the blessing, but the Midrash does. The Midrash assumes human behavior and human nature, which is that they don't stop being jealous of Joseph. But Jacob says, "I got blessings enough for everybody." So this is again. I just want to show one thing. I do want to show that the Torah. If we look back in the Torah, so there's Joseph and Manasseh all the way through here, and so the last thing, and so actually all of chapter 48, I just want to point out, all of chapter 48 is just the blessing for Ephraim and Manasseh of Genesis. That's a whole chapter. Chapter 49, when he starts to bless the rest of the children, the last thing he says to Joseph is, "And now I'm about to die. God will be with you and bring you back to the land of fathers. And now I assign to you one more portion than your brothers, which I wrested from the Amorites with my sword and bow." Which, by the way, I will point out, that doesn't really seem to be a big part of the story of Jacob, but maybe it's more of a prophetic foreshadowing of what's going to happen. The Canaanites or the Amorites. The only battle that Jacob and his family won was over the city of Shechem in the Torah. Midrash has a lot more battles, as we read, which again, maybe this is why those Midrashim exist. It's because here it seems like Jacob's took other territory from the Amorites. Doesn't matter. He's not there at the time. The next line says, "And Jacob called his sons, come together, and that I may tell you what is to befall you in the days to come." And so it goes right into it. The Midrash kind of puts us back to the brothers not being so excited about Joseph getting that first blessing. So now here's what happens about them coming together. And again, Jacob does say, as you just saw, this will be what happens in the future. So there is this sense that as much as this is a blessing about what I hope for you guys, it's not really necessarily coming in the next couple days. So the Midrash really picks up on that. And what you're about to see is a whole lot of very as apocalyptic as we get in Judaism. You're going to see today. All right, so here we go.
Jacob summoned his sons from the land of Egypt. and bade them come to him at Ramses. First, however, commanding them to make themselves clean, that the blessing he was about to bestow might attach itself to them. Another one of his commands was that they were to establish an academy, by the members of which they were to be governed. When his sons were brought into his presence by the angels, Jacob spoke, saying, "Take heed that no dissensions spring up among you, for union is the first condition of Israel's redemption." And he was on the point of revealing a great secret to them concerning the end of time. But while they were standing around the golden bed whereon their father lay, the Shekinah visited him for a moment and departed as quickly. And with her departed also all trace of the knowledge of the great mystery from the mind of Jacob. He had the same experience as his own father Isaac, who also had loss of memory inflicted upon him by God, to prevent him from revealing the secret at the end of time to Esau, when he summoned him to receive his blessing.
Okay, so let's just explain what just happened. So Jacob is going to be prophetic with his sons. So the rabbis just laid out here that as much as there is prophecy here, it would have even been more. But God didn't let it happen. God actually stopped Jacob from giving away the biggest secret of all, which is when is the end of times? When is the Messianic era? So right away, we know that this is not about the next 10 years, 100 years, maybe even 1,000 years. We're talking about way in the future. And so the rabbis are writing this 1,500 years later, 1,500, 1,600 years later. And they're projecting even further. I'm probably not 2,000 years later, right? They probably thought this Messianic era was coming closer to them. But they really felt that Jacob was about to reveal the big secret, but God wouldn't let him. Now, they said that the same thing happened to Isaac, that Isaac was going to reveal the big secret too, but was prevented from doing that. The rabbis will put out, well, that's because Esau would have heard it, and he shouldn't know that. He should know what's going to happen at the end of time. But here, it doesn't really say why Jacob's sons, all of the Israelites, shouldn't know, but it basically tells us that God didn't want Jacob to give that away. The rest of this Midrash you're going to see is, or not all of it, but we're going to start seeing how apocalyptic this time was for the rabbis. And by apocalyptic, I don't mean just there's a great battle, but that it's secret, that there's things at play that are beyond you. And let's take a look. Okay, here we go.
The accident made Jacob apprehensive that his sons were not pious enough to be considered worthy of the revelation concerning the Messianic era. And he said to them, "Ishmael and the sons of Keturah were the blemished among the issue of my grandfather Abraham. My father Isaac begot a blemished issue in Esau. And I fear now that among you too there is one that harbors the intention to serve idols." The 12 men spoke and said, "Hear, O Israel, our Father, the eternal our God, is the one only God. And as your heart is one and united in avouching the Holy One, blessed be he, to be your God, so also are our hearts one and united in avouching him." Whereto Jacob responded, "Praised be the name of the glory of his majesty forever and ever." And although the whole mystery of the Messianic time was not communicated to the sons of Jacob, yet the blessing of each contained some reference to the events of the future.
Right. So this is kind of what we talked about a little bit I mentioned last week. So there's this idea that what makes Jacob special is that all of his children are part of the people, are Israelites, are connected to God. That wasn't the case with Abraham's kids, all of them. It wasn't the case with all of Isaac's kids. But Jacob's kids are all the family. And look, that's definitely a theme in the book of Genesis. Some would say that actually that's the purpose of Genesis. Some would say the purpose of Genesis is to establish why the tribes have to be together. That the story was actually, I mean, the theory and the documentary hypothesis, folks, is essentially that Genesis exists as a backstory to explain why the tribes are connected. Why are Ephraim and Judah connected? Why should we care about the Levites? Because you're a family, and your family is going to stay together. So that is that's definitely part of why we have Genesis. I mean, you can make the argument, why was Genesis even there? To make sure that we understand why we're a group of people, a country, a nation, if you will. So the other patriarchs didn't have that. Jacob did. His kids were all okay. And so now Jacob thinks to himself, the fact that I can't tell this secret now, that I forgot, maybe means that somebody here shouldn't hear it. And so the kids all say, no, we're all going to be good. And they say the Shema, right? They say the Shema, God is one. And then he responds with Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. So he responds with the next line that we add to the Shema, which is, blessed is God's kingdom forever and ever. So they do a little prayer, right? They kind of show you why we say the Shema. We're reenacting that to some extent in the rabbinic mind. And so what happens, at least according to the rabbis, is even though we don't get the big message, there's pieces of the message in the blessing that you see it a little bit in the literal words of Genesis, but it's not. I mean, it's not obvious in every blessing. And we are going to see how the rabbis looked at these blessings, even the parts of them that don't seem prophetic, or at least mega prophetic or messianic prophetic. They're going to go that way. And so they've kind of set up for you why we're going to do this, because each one of these blessings, even though it doesn't seem like it's about the messianic era, it is. So now we're going to look at the individual blessings. So again, we're not going to go all through chapter 49 of Genesis, but trust me when I tell you, and I'll just show you a little bit since we have it, that these are not on the face of them prophetic or messianic, if we would say. I mean, look at Reuben's. Reuben's is not really a blessing at all. It's really kind of a curse. You're my firstborn, my might and my first fruit of my vigor, exceeding in rank and exceeding in honor. Unstable as water, you shall excel no longer. For when you mounted your father's bed, you brought disgrace. My couch he mounted. And again, this is a reference to Reuben sleeping with Bilhah, his stepmother, if you will. Shimon and Levi, our pair. The weapons are tools of lawlessness. You know, he's talking about they're attacking Shechem. Let them not be counted in their assembly. For when they're angry, they slay men. And when pleased, they maim oxen. So these are psychos. That's what he says. They're psychos. Cursed be their anger so fierce and their wrath so relentless. I will divide them in Jacob, scatter them in Israel. That's clearly not a really, on the face of it, a good blessing. That's not something you'd want to have. The rabbis are going to play with this a little bit. And that's why I'm showing it to you. Now, Judah, when we get to the fourth brother, we get a good blessing. O Judah, your brother shall praise, your hand shall be on the nape of your foes, your father's son shall bow low to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. On prey, my son, have you grown? He crouches, lies down like a lion, like the king of beasts. Who dare rouse him? And then it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, so that tribute shall come to him, and the homage of his people shall be his. And then, so again, basically, you can see that there's a prophecy about Judah ruling, being the ruler, which of course comes true in the time of King David, his descendant. And again, of course, for those who would then carry on the Jesus tradition of Jesus being a descendant of King David, the scepter continues on through Jesus. So this was part of the rabbinic mindset when we get to it. Again, Judah's the first one that we get to that's like, oh yeah, that's prophetic for a long time. And again, maybe when it was written maybe during the time of King David again, but if it was said by Jacob, then it's still several hundred years. It's several hundred years before that we'll have King David. So if this is being said in around 1500 BCE, according to like the chronology, this would be 500 years later that we have, 400 or 500 years later that we'd have the time of King David. We have to go through Moses and Joshua and all the judges. The next one, though, I'm not going to go through all of them, but it says, Zebulun shall dwell by the seashore. He shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall rest on Sidon, which is more of a description of where the tribe of Zebulun is, which is coastal and has, and they are maritime tribe. So the point is that with the exception of Judah, these really don't seem messianic. They don't seem like they're written for thousands of years in the future, or more importantly, for that time when everything, will be kind of redone, when there'll be a reset, if you will, in the Messianic era. So let's read the Midrash on the sons.
These were the words addressed by Jacob to his oldest son. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength. Your portion should have been 3 crowns. You should have had the double heritage of your primogeniture and the priestly dignity and the royal power. But by reason of your sin, the birthright is conferred upon Joseph, kingship upon Judah, and the priesthood upon Levi. My son, I know no healing remedy for you, but the man Moses, who will ascend to God, he will make you whole, and God will forgive your sin. I bless you. May your descendants be heroes in the Torah and heroes in war. Though you must lose your birthright, yet you will be the first to enter into possession of your allotment in the Holy Land, and in your territory shall be the first of the cities of refuge, and always shall your name stand first in the list of families of the tribes. Yes, you shall also be the first whose heritage will be seized by the enemy, and the first to be carried away into the lands of exile.
Not again. The rabbis are writing. The rabbis are writing this from the perspective, even if the Torah was written during the time or after the time of King David, they're writing it after the time of the first exile, and maybe even again the second exile, the Roman destruction. But the point is that Reuben loses everything, except he's still part of the tribes. So as much as he could have been written out, he's not. And for that, the Midrash basically says he loses his stature, but he's still part of the community, and he doesn't lose. He's not written out. And that's a big deal. At least in their minds, it means that Jacob knows that all his kids are okay, that Jacob can die knowing that all of his sons are they made it. They're gonna make it. They're not gonna disappear. They're not gonna lose their connection to God. And to again, they'll be the Jewish people. Now Reuben it's a little bit problematic, because again, Reuben is one of those tribes that kind of disappears, right? It's one of the lost tribes. It's one of the 10 northern tribes that gets taken away. So there is this recognition that they're taken away, but they're not gone. And the fact that they are one of the tribes means that they're part of the redemption of the Jewish people. That at some point, the tribe of Reuben will emerge as they're there. They're there somewhere. Even if we can't see them, there's somebody who's a descendant of Reuben who will be found. Folks, this is one of the reasons why the 10 lost tribes need to be found or need to be out there, because they can't ever be gone completely. if any of the tribes are gone, it kind of goes back to this idea that that redemption really didn't happen. So the Jewish people never gave up hope that somewhere these tribes still existed, that somewhere across some river that we haven't found, that we haven't gotten to yet, they're there. The tribes are still there. Reuben is waiting. They're waiting. They're still there. God would never turn his back on them. And so they're there somewhere, which again is one of the reasons why, the legends were so powerful that Mormons were able to build on them, or other Christian groups that would send missions to convert or to reclaim these tribes or to bring them back. The Mormons weren't the only people who were motivated by that. They were the ones who were, I guess, to some extent, the most well known by us because they were American, and they did it in a way that we would go, how did you think the Indians, Native Americans were the tribes? But there are a lot of other Christians that thought that those tribes were out there because Jews have been saying it for thousands of years, and that it's necessary for the Messiah for this redemption to happen. And that if we can find them, then we must be really close to redemption. So, the rabbis are playing this out in their minds, which is, Reuben was punished, but not so much, in that they're not going to be, that they're gone, and that to some extent, like, Reuben's vindication is going to be messianic. So what's the messianic part of Reuben? Well, that he's gone, but he's not gone. He's going to be found. So again, it's not what you would assume. It's not very obvious, let's put it that way, that's the messianic part of Reuben. But that's it. And they do believe that Reuben will eventually be found. But again, Reuben is punished, and so are Shimon and Levi. Let's read.
After Reuben had had his ears pulled, thus he retired, and Jacob called his sons Shimon and Levi to his side, and he addressed them in these words: Brothers you were of Dinah, but not of Joseph, whom you sold into slavery. The weapons of violence with which you smote Shechem were stolen weapons, for it was not seemly for you to draw the sword. That was Esau's portion. To him was it said, by the sword shall you live. Into the council of the tribe of Shimon my soul will not come when they foregather at Shittim to do vicious deeds. And my glory will not be united to the assembly of Korah, the descendants of Levi. In their anger, Shimon and Levi slew the prince of Shechem, and in their self-will they sold Joseph the bull into slavery. Accursed was the city of Shechem when they entered to destroy it. If they remain united, no ruler will be able to stand up before them. No war will prosper against them. Therefore will I divide and scatter their possession among the possessions of the other tribes. The descendants of Shimon will many of them be poor men who will wander from tribe to tribe and beg for bread. And also Levi's tribe will gather its tithes and gifts from all the others.
All right. So Shimon and Levi definitely get a curse or not a real positive blessing. Again, they won't disappear. The Midrash does a few really interesting things here. And again, there's a few different Midrashim that are brought together, that are woven together, if you will. One of them is this really interesting Midrash that says, you were a good brother to Dinah. You maybe defended her, but you didn't defend Joseph, your brother. So there's this great idea here that, even though you were maybe thinking you were taking care of your family, you're a liar. You're lying to yourself if you think you're a hero, because you didn't. You're the same people that did that to your own brother. So it's an interesting little thing that's not in the text. It's not in the Torah, but the Midrash points it out, that you can't pretend to be a hero when, a tough guy, when you did what you did. And so it's a great lesson on what it is to be a hero and what it is to think that you're tough. But as we saw elsewhere already in the Midrash, it goes hand in hand with this idea that Shimon and Levi, they're not just psychos, they're really, really tough. I mean, they're not to be trifled with because they can literally beat anybody. And because they're so tough, God's got to do something about this. So first of all, there also is a piece in here that the Midrash tells us that Shimon and Levi's descendants are also not great. They do bad stuff. Now, the Levites are the tribe of Moses and Aaron, but they're also the tribe of Korach. And so Korach is a bad guy, obviously, the guy who revolts against Moses, and very destructive guy. He ends up getting swallowed up by the earth. So the Midrash reminds us Levi there's some problems in that tribe. And then for Shimon, one of the descendants of Shimon was involved in this act of paganism and idolatry that goes on in Shittim, right? So Simon's family, problematic too. So the Midrash reminds us of that. But that's not the best part of this, which is because Shimon and Levi are so powerful, it's God that's is going to essentially put them, mix them up so that they can't fight, so that they can't do what they do, which is fight and kill. And so God scatters Shimon, and Shimon disappears. The tribe of Shimon doesn't get exiled. It's not one of the lost tribes. Shimon disperses and kind of like dilutes into the tribe of Judah. It's in the southern area, and they're not able to kind of withstand Judah's encroachment, if you will, and they just kind of merge with Judah. So they're a tribe that doesn't really get exiled, but they disappear nonetheless. And so the rabbis kind of point out that Shimon and Levi, and the Levites, of course, live everywhere. They don't have a tribal portion. They also don't disappear. So those tribes don't disappear, but they also are never able to kind of like be a united tribe. They don't retain a tribal entity, any kind of territorial entity. I mean, Levites, arguably, we still know who Levites are. Anybody named Levi or Levine, you're all Levites, right? But not Shimon. And the rabbis point out something interesting here, which is that was God's plan. Because if the Levites and Shimon had been united and had been like able to, they would defeat any enemy. And it's not part of the plan. In order for the Israelites to fulfill their mission and to do what they have to do, they have to be exiled. And so the Midrash says, I will divide and scatter their possession amongst the other possessions of the tribes, because otherwise nobody will ever be able to attack them. The Babylonians won't, the Romans won't. No one will ever be able to destroy the Jewish people if Shimon and Levi are able to fight back. So they actually almost have to be scattered in order for the Jewish people to not be able to win. You have to have that happen. So that's kind of the prophetic apocalyptic future for the Shimon, for those tribes, is they have to be scattered amongst the people, and they have to kind of live that way, because otherwise Jewish people can't be defeated. That's the rabbi's imagination for, again, why Shimon and Levi are done. So here's a little bit more about Shimon and Levi.
The words of Jacob, I will divide them in Jacob, spoken of Shimon and Levi, were fulfilled on Shimon in particular. When 24,000 of Shimon fell at Shittim, the widows they left behind married husbands of all the other tribes. Nevertheless, Jacob did not dismiss Shimon and Levi without blessing them. The tribe of Shimon was to bring forth the teachers and the beadles needed by all Israel, and Levi, the scholars that would expound the Torah and render decisions according to its teachings.
Yeah, and we don't really get that so much in the Torah. The Midrash tells us, no, they're important people. They, again, even though they're scattered, and again, at Shittim, um, so many people and again, that's even before they get into the land of Israel, even before they cross with Joshua, they lose all these people. No, Shimon and Levi are important, and there are going to be scholars who are descendant from them. And even if they're not scholars, the interesting thing is they're beadle, right? They're the people who help run the school. They're the people who are the janitors. They're the people who, turn on the lights, the custodians. That's the right word, custodians.
Rabbi,
Yes.
why would God want the Israelites to be defeated?
Because remember, by the time the rabbis are writing this, it already happened. And I would say to some extent they're explaining why it is they've had to live the life that they've had to. And it's this kind of idea that without this happening, without the Israelites doing what they're doing, the final plan can't follow. So two things. The first is that it's already happened, so there must be a plan. There must be a reason why this happened. And then the reason that it happens is so that the final plan can happen. So that's part of the apocalyptic vision of what's happening here, which is that it's a secret. We don't know when the final coming together and the vindication of Jacob's family is going to happen. But it hasn't happened yet, and it will happen. And when it does, it's going to fulfill this blessing. So they really did feel, the rabbis really felt that the secret to the history of the future of the Jewish people, the history, yes, but more importantly, the future is in Jacob's blessing. And they would look at it as a guide. And as much as anything else in the Torah, and I mean anything else in the Torah, I mean like the prophet Isaiah or the prophet Jeremiah or anybody else that people have looked at for apocalyptic or messianic prophecies, interestingly, this chapter, the one in Genesis, is the one that the rabbis looked at for prophetic secrets. And they'd look at it as a that it's there in there. And the rabbis perpetuated that with these midrashim, and they would look at it with that. They'd look at it for that reason, and again, partly because of this idea that one day all these tribes would come back together, but also because the chapter does include, as we saw with the Judah blessing, there is a prophetic element to it. There is this thing that opens up here, which is that this will happen. And it really is this idea that there must be some other secrets in there. If we could just look at it the right way, it's in there. And it's one of the reasons why the blessings were used for, and they still are, they're used for our artistic purposes. They're used as inspiration because people see in them like messages. They see messages about the Jewish people in this text. And I mean, arguably, the line about Judah, I mean, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but you can make the argument that the reason why Jesus had to be from the tribe of Judah is because of that line. I mean, you can actually make that argument that line is, I mean, again, it's not important to every Christian that Jesus was from the tribe of Judah, but you can make the argument that the only reason why he is, or why that's in the Torah, and why we have a story of a family that is clearly from Nazareth, but is really from the tribe of Judah. I mean, I got to tell you something. By the time of Jesus, nobody cared what tribe you were part of. Nobody talked about it. It's nowhere in the rabbinic discussions of the time, or the contemporary discussions of Josephus or other people what tribe anybody's a part of. The only thing we knew is who was a priest, who was a Kohen, who was a priest, and again, who were a little bit of who were Levites, but not even there was not even a big issue of whether you were a Levite. It was whether you were a priest or whether you were a non-priest. It's about the only thing. Nobody talked about, hey, I have an ancestor who is from Shimon, or I have an ancestor who is from whatever. No, first of all, most of the tribes are scattered, well scattered by then, scattered for 500, 600 years by then. But on top of it, we just don't have anybody writing about it. But yet, in the Christian Bible, the fact that Judah, that Jesus has to be from the tribe of Judah was important for the Gospel of Matthew, and it's important to some extent. It's in other places where references to the scepter or to that little bit to that blessing from Genesis chapter 49. So it's a pretty important, it's I don't want to say it's the most important prophetic part of the Bible, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely up there of people trying to say, well, what's going to happen in the future? So that's why, as I said at the beginning, this is apocalyptic. This Midrash that we're reading today is from different places. This is not all from one place. Some of this is in the Talmud. Some of this is in other non-rabbinic sources like the Apocrypha, which again is about secrets. They love this. And there's actually a whole book of the Apocrypha called the Testament of the 12 Tribes, the 12 Sons, which is all about this messianic stuff. And we found it and we're like, oh my gosh, here's a book that's all about the 12 sons and what's going to happen to them in the future. So it was kind of went hand in hand with this. So again, as much as it's about the history of the Jewish people and about what the sons of Jacob will do and maybe had done by the time the writers of the Torah had written, it's about way into the future. And I'm going to say, like, you wouldn't think that. I mean, it's not like when you read it, you go, oh yeah, this is about the this is about the day to come, the day to come. So again, the first three are clearly not positive, but the rabbis still found things in them that they could maybe say, but it's not going to be that bad. And even when it's bad, you have a role to play. So let's take a look. You're necessary for this whole story to follow. Now read Judah, and I've already I've made it a little anticlimactic because we've talked about it, but let's read this.
When the remaining sons of Jacob heard the rebukes dealt out by their father to these three, they feared to hear like reproaches, and they tried to slip away from his presence. Especially Judah was alarmed that his father might taunt him with his trespass concerning Tamar. But Jacob spoke thus to him, Judah, you deserve your name. Your mother called you Yehudah because she gave praise to God at your birth, and so shall your brethren praise you, and they will all call themselves by your name. As you confessed your sin openly, so also your descendants, Achan, David, and Manasseh, will make public avowal of their sins, and the Lord will hear their prayer.
Okay, pause right there before we get too much further, just to kind of explain, because I don't want to, we're about to get into stuff that's, well, the messianic part. Let's just explain what we just read. First of all, the brothers are all scared because the first three are not really good. So let's get out of here. I don't need to hear anything more. Let's go. Before our Father blesses me, right? I'm going to get out of here. But no, it changes with Judah. And Judah gets blessed. And the rabbis point out, he could have not been, because he wasn't 100% okay either. He's maybe better compared to them, right? But is he really without fault? No. He has this horrible story with Tamar, his daughter-in-law. He withholds his son from him and ends up sleeping with her and having his own kids, grandkids with Tamar in Genesis. But the difference is that Judah essentially paid the price for his withholding of his son, but also he admits it. He says, I did something wrong. And the rabbis point out that this is an interesting thing about Judah, is that Judah is a hero, not because he's tough or because he's the guy who can defeat everybody in war, but that he is humble enough and he's man enough, if you will, to use that word, but he admits his mistakes and he cops to what he does. You know, he knows he's not right, and he'll say when he's not right. And they say this is actually similar to what his descendants will do too. His descendants will screw up and they'll admit to it. So the first that they give is in the list chronologically is Achan. The story of Achan is in the book of Joshua, and Achan is one of the fighters, one of the leaders of Judah. He's the tribe of Judah, and during one of the wars, one of the battles for the land of Israel during Joshua's time, he takes property that he wasn't supposed to take. He was supposed to destroy it. He took it. He enriched himself. He admitted to it, and they killed him. They kill him. Achan is killed for breaking God's rule of taking this stuff. So he admits to it, and he suffers the price. David did a few things wrong, not least of which was stealing a man's wife and having him killed, which the rabbis pretty much put up there as the worst thing that he did. He did some other stuff too, but that was really, really bad. So he admitted it. And what's interesting is that one of his descendants, King Manasseh, is also a horrible person. Really, really bad. I mean, like sacrificing his kids to a foreign god, an alien god, bad. But he admits to it too. So one of the things that the rabbis point out is that Judah and his descendants are hardly perfect, but they admit their mistakes. And that is, they take the price, they take the punishment, and that is something that they think is of value. Of course, it doesn't hurt that Judah is really the only tribe that survives. Let's face it. I mean, the Levites, some of them survive, not all of them, but most of Judah survives. That's why we're Jews, because the tribe of Judah survived. We are the tribe of Judah. And so he does get a good blessing. And let's read the blessing part of it. This is why, again, Judah is singularly special, if you will.
Your hands will send darts after the fleeing foe, and your father's sons shall pay you respect. You have the impudence of a dog and the bravery of a lion. You saved Joseph from death, and Tamar and her 2 sons from the flames. No people and no kingdom will be able to stand up against you. Rulers shall not cease from the house of Judah, nor teachers of the law from his posterity, until his descendant Mashiach come, and the obedience of all peoples be unto him. How glorious is Mashiach of the house of Judah. His loins girded, he will go out to do battle with his enemies. No king and no ruler will prevail against him. The mountains will be dyed red with their blood, and the garments of Mashiach will be like the garments of him that presses wine. The eyes of Mashiach will be clearer than pure wine, for they will never behold unchastity and bloodshed. And his teeth will be whiter than milk, for they will never bite anything that is taken by violence.
Okay. All right. So that's at least one vision of what the Messiah looks like. Not exactly the Messiah of Galilee. It is not a Messiah that is gentle and teaching people Torah. This is a Messiah that is in battle. This is a Messiah that is killing lots of people. Now look, and I have Reverend Lynn on the line. She's here with us, right? She can testify to this. There are some visions of Jesus leading people in battle, and there are images you may have seen in artwork of Jesus, leading armies. But for the most part, that isn't necessarily a big part of the vision of what Jesus has to do. Maybe his followers have to do it. Crusaders sure believe that they were doing Jesus's work, and other armies in the last several hundred years have also felt that they were doing God's work when they were killing. But this is, folks, this is the original visions of Messiah that we had, which were leading the Jewish people in battle. And I would say that this is actually normative. This is not, you know, a different, this is not the difference. This is the standard. The Messiah that Jewish people were waiting for during the time of Jesus was not a passive leader. It was not somebody who was teaching and trying to tell people, you know, let's all get along. This was a guy that the Jewish people believed
didn't fulfill that vision.
Drenched in blood. What, Reverend?
Certainly did not fulfill that classic vision of what the Messiah was to be.
Yeah. So what Jesus
I
really
have a
did,
question.
what the followers of Jesus really did was turn it on its head. And they had to. I mean, to some extent they had to, because that's not the life that Jesus led. So they really did something kind of miraculous, which is completely change what the Messiah looked like. And again, I completely objectively and impartially, if you looked at the representations of Jesus in art, in like what your mind looks like when you think about Jesus, it's not a guy with wearing a cloak that's drenched in blood, and you know, has got a sword in one hand, and is this thing that you just read, which is pretty violent. And it's meant to be inspirational. It's meant to make people feel hope that there will be a king, there will be a ruler that will fight your battles for you and avenge Jewish blood. But Christianity was flipping it on its side, on its over end. I mean, it's a totally different vision. So there
are a couple little spots where Jesus gets fired up and angry and knocks over tables and things. But what does this mean? For never will they bite out that is taken by violence. It almost sounds like they should be vegetarians. So what does that mean?
Well, yeah, when I read it, I was like, gosh, that doesn't go with
doesn't go with the rest of the sentence.
That his teeth are whiter than milk. But I think the point of this is that the guy is able to he's able to not live like he's able to
contradict the previous line, because at first he's saying, you know, he's going to shed all this blood, and then he says he's not going to.
Yeah, but again, it's almost like I think what they're saying is that
good girl.
He's so
princess.
so good at what he's so decisive in battle. So
they'll never be bloodshed again. Is that?
No, it's more that he, like, when it's more like he doesn't ever have to worry about where his next meal's coming from. There's never like a, you know how like when you see soldiers who are out there in the trenches, and they're like, they look like they've been through hell. He doesn't ever have to do that. He's winning every battle, and he doesn't ever have to look like, I mean, he's literally going into battle, can brush his teeth, can eat whatever he wants. I mean, they seem to be really focused on the teeth part, but again, you know, he doesn't have to go into battle and spend weeks and months out in the field. I mean, one could make the argument that King David, who's very successful militarily, had to go out and fight, and had to like keep
keep fighting all the time. And this kind of idea that the Messiah doesn't even have to worry about that because he's going to win every battle. And by the time, he'll just go out, he'll go fight, he'll come back at night and he'll have a nice meal at home and brush his teeth and go back to bed in his bed. So he doesn't have to worry about this.
As I read it again, it's almost like his presence creates that, and he doesn't have to participate in it. It's simply by being there, those things happen.
Yeah. And I think that this is, there's this kind of like the grizzled soldier, I don't want to say like the image you have of like Ulysses S. Grant or one of those guys that's got a cigar and he's never shaved and he's kind of got dirt on his face, but he's really good at fighting, but he's always got to fight. This guy is literally like, he just goes out exactly as Reverend Wynn says, and the battle is won just by him being there. This is this idea that the Messiah is just literally, when the Messiah goes into battle, no one will be able to withstand him. And again, I mean, the fact that the rabbis could get this from the blessing that Judah gets shows you where their mind was at, what they were thinking about. They had already gone past Judah being the king. They'd already gone past that. It was part of it. I mean, 100% part of it. This is all about Judah being king. The rulers are not going to just ever go from the house of Judah. That's for sure. But what they actually are saying is that it's not about being king over the Jewish people. It's being king over everybody. The obedience of all people will be unto him. It's not enough for the Messiah to redeem the Jewish people. It's not enough for him to be a king and to defend the Jews. Everybody is going to pledge obedience to the King of the Jews. So this is why you can even get, and you can make the argument that the need for people to accept Jesus comes to some extent from this idea of what the Jews said about the Messiah, which by the time Jesus was on the scene, these kind of midrashim already existed. There already was this idea that the King Messiah was going to defeat the Romans and anybody else, and everyone was going to be subservient to us. By the way, part of that was because of what the Jews saw the Romans do. When the Jews saw what the Romans did, they said, well, we're going to do that too. Just like everybody has to bow to the Romans, our Messiah is going to replace now the Jews will be like the Romans, and we'll be the ones who can march through any country and have everybody bow down to us like they did to them. So this is what
you just said that the replacement ideology is our fault.
To some extent, it is because we saw what the Romans did. Mm. We had seen what the Greeks and what the Egyptians had done too, but nobody did what the Romans did. And so by the time that this was being written, the Jews were very close to. I mean, they knew what was happening. They saw they saw what could happen, and they said, "Yeah, well, that will be us. If this can happen." See, here's the problem: if God allowed the Romans to do what they did, then God must assuredly have a better future for us. If everything the Romans had, we're going to have it at least as good as they did. So our king is going to be bigger than the Romans, and I think that happens once the Jews come in contact with the Romans. Until the Romans are the Romans. I mean, the Jews were around before the Romans, but when they saw what the Roman Empire had become, that put into their minds that that's a possibility. Once you know that something's a possibility, I mean, it's the same thing with anything. Whenever you see somebody, I mean, I'm not going to say like not everybody wants that or has to have that, but when somebody who's rich and feels rich in their community, and then they go to another community and then they see, oh, you mean that you could have that? I mean, I can have a plane too. Then they go, oh, I'm going to have a plane. I'm not rich until I have that plane. So I think at some point they knew we knew what the possibility was. And so we had to have that possibility. Couldn't say, well, we couldn't go backwards. We couldn't say, okay, when the Messiah comes, he's going to give us power in our own land. He's going to reinstate the Jewish people in the land of Israel, and we'll have a perfect peace in our land. Were there some rabbis who said that? I'm sure there were. But there are other people who are saying, you mean King David fought against everybody around and won these battles against the Ammonites. Well, now there's Romans, and our king, who's a descendant of David, has to be at least as good as that. So, yeah, I mean, once it becomes a possibility, once we know it's a possibility, it's got to happen. So that was, in a sense, a replacement theology. And of course, Christianity built on it. And I don't think they did anything other than kind of replace what it means to be a Messiah and then kind of build on it and say, well, yeah, if God wants us to be in charge, then it means that everybody, look, that type of mentality allows for somebody to come to the new world and say, you know what, all of you people that I see now that are, running around, you got to be Christian because God wants it that way. God wants you to submit to the ruler of everything, which again, and they didn't say, well, I mean, they were saying in the name of Jesus, you're going to now be a Christian. So I think to some extent we helped that. We were the part that goes from point A to point C. We were point B in that, which was the Messiah is going to make everybody submit. So again, I think in our point in history, it was militarily, as far as power goes, as far as what the Romans did, that would have been enough. It doesn't talk about the Messiah making everybody Jewish, by the way. It doesn't. It does say that the people are going to be obedient to the Messiah and to the house of Judah. All right, so that's Judah. And it's not over, by the way. That even though that's the only one that's really messianic, it's not over.
For a long time, I believed that Jesus did come so everybody'd be a Jew, but that's my own theory. He had no idea about a church.
It could be, but it could be that he wanted people to follow the Torah, which you can make the argument. There's parts of it that only could have happened if Jesus did come. So make that argument. Right. There's an interesting argument that can be made. I agree with you on that, Reverend Lynn. I actually believe that to some extent, that there is I don't know if it was God's decision, but is the only way that people are going to get part of this message. All right. So now the rest of the sons who again are going to be included in this messianic speculation.
Though Issachar was the older, Zebulun came next to be blessed as a reward for the sacrifice he had made for his brother's sake. For when Issachar chose the study of Torah as his vocation, Zebulun decided to devote himself to business and support his brother with the profits of his trade, that he might give himself up to the law undisturbed. His blessing was that he would conquer the seacoast as far as Sidon.
Yeah, Sidon. So that's all the way up to Lebanon. So Zebulun does something interesting here. He's not a scholar. He's not necessarily studying like his brother, his full brother Issachar, Zebulun and Issachar. But he's given his name was put first, blessing. And the rabbis point out that's because he did something very honorable, which is that Zebulun decided, I'm going to work so that my younger brother can study. That my older brother can study. So Zebulun goes to work so that Issachar can study in the academy and be teachers. So according to this tradition, Issachar was they were Torah scholars, which we don't really have that in. I mean, we don't know who was from the tribe of Issachar by the time of the rabbis, but they believe that there were Issacharites that were part of their group, a part of our ancestors. And so Zebulun had done something very, very selfless, which is that he went to so that his brother could study. And this is an interesting idea that still persists to this very day, which is that there are those who work so that others can study. And there are brothers who go into the diamond business so that other brother can study Torah. And this happening right now in parts of Israel and parts of New York and parts of Europe and parts of Australia. Wherever there's very religious groups, there are families where a son is sometimes the older one, sometimes the younger one, whoever kind of has the skills that are identified early on as being more, maybe more adept at Torah, that son will study while the other son will go to work and take care of that other son. So this is pretty much a reality, folks. This is not something from thousands of years ago. This is happening right now. And the rabbis want to point out that because of this selflessness, Zebulun is mentioned first. So there is a huge reward for it. Not only are you accounted the Torah of the person that you helped, right? So their Torah becomes yours, right? Their teachings and their success in Torah is your success. But that you actually get this blessing of kind of being elevated. And so you shouldn't feel bad about what you're doing. Shouldn't feel bad about your lot in life that you don't get to sit around and study Torah all day. You're helping that happen, and so you're getting the credit for it. I don't know if it helps all the time. You'd have to ask somebody who's in that situation working in a 9 to 5. It's not really a 9 to 5 job. It's usually a 7 to 7 or 8 job, while their brother is, I was going to say their sister. It's not their sister. Their brother is studying. I don't know. You'd have to ask whether they feel okay with that. But the rabbis want you to know it's okay. You're getting credit for it. This happens going all the way back to Jacob's sons. So that's Zebulun, and he gets rewarded for it. Not too much prophetic there, other than it continues on and it doesn't end. That happens. But Issachar is again really the one who's doing the Torah teaching. So what does it say about that?
Issachar, said Jacob, will take upon himself the burden of the study of the Torah, and all the other tribes will come to him and ask him to decide their doubts on legal questions. And his descendants will be members of the Sanhedrin and the scholars that will occupy themselves with fixing the calendar. Jacob blessed Issachar also with the blessing that the fruits of his land should be exceedingly large. And this brought a heavenly as well as an earthly profit in its train. For when the heathen to whom the fruits were sold marveled at them, the Jewish merchants explained that their extraordinary size was due to the merits of the tribe of Issachar, whom God rewarded for their devotion to the Torah. And thus, many of the heathen were induced to convert to Judaism.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of strange in that Issachar's blessing seems to not be about Torah, but it seems to be more about the bounty of the land and the fruit of the land. But the rabbis are saying it's really about the fruit of Torah, and the Torah brings forward fruit and good crops. And what happens because of this great produce is that people are enticed to become Jewish because they see the fruits of of his tribe. Okay, well, kind of what goes with that is this idea that people are supposed to convert to Judaism, which is not exactly always what we see in Judaism. But at this point, it was pretty much still accepted that people were converting to Judaism when the rabbis wrote this. And so they actually
what does the Torah say about Issachar?
What
does the Torah say about Issachar's blessing?
It's
not the same.
It's actually going to show it to you. I was actually just about to bring it up, Reverend. There's an interesting thing here, which is I do want to point out that there is um, there's actually two places where the tribes are blessed. One of them we're actually about to read. The one of them comes in Vizot HaBracha, which is the last Torah portion in the Torah. It's the blessing that Moses gives to the people, and the rabbis kind of will blend together the blessings in these two places. Here, I'll show you what I mean. This is the end of, this is Deuteronomy chapter 30, 32 and 33. 33 is Vizot HaBracha. This is the blessing. And so he blesses the tribes. And so here he blesses, Moses blesses them in a different order. Benjamin, Joseph, doesn't quite go in backwards order as you're about to see. Zebulun, we just read about. It says, rejoice, Zebulun, on your journeys, and Issachar in your tents, which the rabbis also interpret whenever you see in your tents, it means this place you're studying, like Jacob, who's a man of the tent, right? So Issachar seems to be the homebody. Scholars where Zebulun is out on the course, and out on journeys. And then it says about Issachar, they invite kin into the mountain when they offer sacrifices of success, for they draw on the riches of the sea and the hidden hoards of the sand. So you can see they're both together, which is even more pronounced than it was in Genesis. And you can see that that there is this sense of that excuse me, that Issachar is successful with his food and with his sacrifices. So let's look at what it says in Genesis. Zebulun will be by the seashore. It should be a haven for ships, and his flank shall rest on Zidon. So there it's Zidon. It actually says the word Zidon there, right? Issachar is a strong-boned ass crouching among the sheepfolds. When he saw how good was security and how pleasant was the country, he bent his shoulder to the burden and became a toiling serf. Now, it doesn't really talk that much about what you see there, but when you blend the two together, you get kind of when you blend the Genesis and Deuteronomy blessings, you kind of get this feeling that Issachar is going to be, things will be good for him, successful. He has to work hard, but things are going to be okay. And there's other places in Midrash, we have this idea that Issachar is just a solid guy. He's just an upstanding guy. He works hard too, but just a reliable guy. Nothing really bad. I mean, part of it is that we don't really know anything about these tribes. They don't pop up a lot during the time of Judges. We don't hear a lot about the tribes in the Bible, so we really don't know that much about them. And Zebulun is kind of, we know even less, except we do know that he's seafaring tribe, and so he kind of, he's the pirate, he's the merchant, the merchant. So he has this kind of legend, but it doesn't really fit in with the narrative of Israel, because Israelites were not a seafaring people. So they're almost an aberration. They're almost like, that crazy guy who has a boat like Judith. There are Jews who have boats, but it's not been part of our culture for a long time. So they don't really know what to make of it. Issachar, also not a lot of text, but let's just say they're a solid, upstanding people. And again, the rabbis felt that they made up, some of the rabbis were from their tribe. I will say that when we get to Dan, the next tribe, you're going to see that gets a little confusing, or not confusing, but a little dramatic.
In blessing Dan, Jacob's thoughts were occupied chiefly with his descendant Samson, who, like God, without any manner of assistance, conferred victory upon his people. Jacob even believed the strong, heroic man to be the Messiah. But when Samson's death was revealed to him, he exclaimed, I wait for your salvation, O Lord, for your help is unto all eternity, while Samson's help is only for a time. The redemption, continued Jacob, will not be accomplished by Samson the Danite, but by Elijah the Gadite, who will appear at the end of time.
Yeah, so this is weird.
Yeah, how did they get from what's in the Torah to that?
Yeah, well, let's take a quick look back at what the Torah says, which is, it says that Dan will govern his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall, well, of course, is one of the tribes of Israel, but that he is going to be one of the governors. The word Dan, and it says Dan Yadin. It's a play on the name Dan, which means to judge. And there they translated judge as to govern. And then it says he's a Nachash. He's a serpent by the side of the road, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heel so that the rider is thrown backwards. And then it says, I will wait for your deliverance, O Lord. Well, the Midrash really is based on that phrase. I will wait for your deliverance, O Lord. So the rabbis are saying, well, wow, that's a strange phrase. What is that? Well, I will wait for thy salvation, O Lord, right? So it actually quotes the Torah here and says that refers to the Messiah himself, right? Not exactly what you would have thought, but we have an issue here, which is that Dan, we do know a little bit about Dan. We don't know a lot, but we do know about this really famous guy, Samson, who is a Danite. And Samson is clearly miraculous. He clearly has some elements that the rabbis were looking for in a Messiah. Namely, you can't beat the guy. He's literally, imbued with superhuman strength when God is with him, right? And Jacob, being able to be prophetic, sees that and he says, oh, that guy must be the Messiah. But then he sees the whole story. And when he realizes that Samson is defeated, he says he's not the Messiah. But he sees pieces of it in Samson, so that's why he says that. And what he has to say in the end is, oh, I'll wait. He's not the guy. And what's interesting is they just threw in the tribe of Gad. And the tribe of Gad is also a tribe we know nothing. I mean, we literally know nothing about the tribe of Gad. Now, here's the weird thing. We don't know that Elijah is from the tribe of Gad, but they say he is, and they say that he is, they say he's from the tribe of Gad because that kind of leads to the fact that even though Elijah is not the promised redeemer, is not the Messiah, he announces the Messiah, and that it's enough for the tribe of Gad to play a prophetic and apocalyptic role in the future of the people. We really don't know anything about Gad, but they did incorporate, as I said, they incorporated the blessing that Dan has, or that. But the only line about Gad in the blessing is, Gad shall be raided by raiders, but he shall raid at their heels, which seems to mean that God is a tribe of Bedouin raiders, that they're guys that go fight, and they fight against people and people fight against them, but they're good at it. They fight. That's the tribe of Gad. But we really don't know much about them, other than that they are one of the first tribes to be exiled to But when the Babylonian, the Assyrians come in, they're one of the first tribes to disappear. Here we have a little bit about Gad. I mean, literally a little bit, not much, which is that Elijah is a Gadite. We don't have that. It doesn't say that. It actually says he's a Gilead. It doesn't say, it says he's from Tishbe. It says he's a Tishbite. But we don't really have anything about him. We don't know exactly. So it's almost like one of those things like we have with Jesus that, being Jesus of the tribe of Judah, well, Elijah can be from the Gadites. He can be from that tribe. Some of these are kind of small and not very helpful. Next one being an example. Oh, but I do want to point out, so Samson is almost messianic, but not quite. And what the rabbis wanted to tell us was there were other messiahs like that. And that's probably a little to do with Bar Kokhba, the Shimon Bar Kokhba revolt, where Shimon Bar Kokhba was militarily successful for a few years and almost had like a Samson type legend about him. They couldn't be defeated in battle and was so strong and everything else, but he got defeated. And the rabbis want you to know that we're not there yet. We're not at the time of the Messiah yet. And just like we're waiting for, we're still waiting. Just like Jacob said, it's going to happen, but don't look for these fleeting guys that just come for a little bit. I will wait for salvation, right? It's still going to happen. It's not there yet. All right. So here's Asher. Asher, not a lot, because we don't have a lot about the tribe. We don't get anything in the Torah about them.
Asher's blessing was the beauty of his women, who would be sought in marriage by kings and high priests.
It's not a whole lot, right? Just get really pretty women from the tribe of Asher, and that's what they're known for. I don't know. That's it. We don't get much else there. Nothing in the Bible would really kind of lead you to that too. Here's Naphtali. This is an interesting one.
In Naphtali's land, all fruits would ripen quickly, and they would be brought as presents to kings and gain royal favor for the givers. This blessing was fulfilled in the plain of Gennesaret. At the same time, Naphtali's blessing was a prophecy concerning his descendant Deborah, who was like a hind let loose against Sisera to conquer him, and she gave goodly words in her song of Israel's victory. Naphtali himself deserved the description applied to Deborah, for he was swift as a hart to do the will of God, and he was a fleet messenger to his father and the tribes. They sent him wherever they would, and he executed their errands with dispatch. He served the brothers of Joseph as herald to announce to Jacob the glad tidings, Joseph is yet alive. And when the stricken father saw him approach, he said, Lo, here comes Naphtali the lovable, who proclaims peace.
Yeah. So this kind of goes along with this idea of Naphtali, that he's fast, that his tribe, he and his tribe are fast runners. They're fast. They're the fleet of foot guys. They're the ones who can run fast and far, and they're the ones that we rely on for that. The Torah says, it says that he's like a hind. He's like a deer. That's why in depictions of when we see depictions of Naphtali and the images that are used on an artwork, it's always as a deer. The deer were considered to be by Jewish sources. They're fast. They're oftentimes a sign of strength, even though they're prey. They're an animal that can be preyed upon. They also, in their full antlers and regalia, they can be kind of tough looking, right? And they're considered to be a symbol. They're used in royal crests and signs and for other people, right? So it's not just the Jews that have used the heart as a symbol. So I know some company, wasn't it? Isn't it like one of the insurance company uses the deer as a symbol, right?
For the Hartford.
Hartford, right? Yeah. And I was going to say, then you have it in the Harry Potter stuff, right?
Right, the stag is a symbol of.
So it's considered to be a pretty, even though it's an animal that is preyed upon, it's considered a tough enough animal and fast animal. And so Naphtali is associated with a deer, and it says so. I mean, it literally says he's like a deer. Now, part of the problem of Naphtali is we don't know a lot about Naphtali either. We don't read a lot about Naphtali in the Bible. There aren't a lot of descriptions of Naphtali, and the line about him again in the blessing here is the hind let loose, which yields lovely fawns. That's it. That's all we get. We do have a battle that's fought in the tribe, in the area of Naphtali later on in the book of Judges, which is the story of Deborah, Sisera. Let's not forget Yael, the actual heroine of the story, who actually kills Sisera. I mean, Deborah's the hero too of the story, but it really is a story of, again, takes place in that area. It doesn't say, by the way, that Deborah is from the tribe of Naphtali. Was she? She could have been. It doesn't say so in the book of Judges, but it's considered to be, again, an interesting story. It's definitely a story that we have about the area of Naphtali, and because of that blessing, it says that it yields lovely it yields lovely fawns. One of those fawns might be Deborah herself. So it could be a description of Deborah being one of those great people that comes out of and even though, again, you think that's a kind of a sexist comment. Well, Deborah clearly isn't using her beauty to defeat Sisera, but she's a lovely fawn, and that she's a great example of somebody who comes out of the tribe of Naphtali. So interestingly here, where we had a Danite who is Samson, here we have a Naphthalite who is Deborah. So the rabbis did not have any issue focusing on the women that come out of that tribe as well as the men. Again, we don't know for sure that she was from that tribe, but assuming she was, she's the hero that comes out of the tribe of Naphtali. So that is the fleet-footed Naphtali. Again, so now we get to the next person who's blessed in the order, which is, as we go through them, we get a blessing for Joseph, who already was essentially blessed through his sons, but he does get a separate blessing here, which is why some people feel that this chapter was actually written, chapter 49, was not written by the same person who wrote chapter 48. I'm not going to go there because it doesn't have to, and it doesn't really matter. But Joseph does get a blessing with his brothers, which the rabbis have to point out. Well, he seems to get blessed again. Here's what happens.
You got to put it up on the screen, Rabbi.
Oh, sorry. I still have the Torah up there.
Love it, Torah.
So here's Joseph's, just so we already have it. It says Joseph is a wild ass by a spring, wild colts on a hillside. Archers bitterly assailed him. They shot at him and harried him. Yet his bow stayed taut, and his arms were made firm. By the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the rock of Israel. Seems pretty good, other than it's like, blessings of the deep, blessings of the breast and womb. The blessings of your father surpass the blessings of my ancestors. To the utmost bound of the eternal hills, may they rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the elect of his brothers. That's what it says about Joseph, which is pretty good blessing, seeing as how he already had his sons get blessed. But let's explain why he gets this blessing.
Joseph's blessing exceeded the blessing of all his brothers. Jacob spoke, O son whom I bred up, Joseph whom I raised, and who was strong to resist the enticements of sin. You conquered all the magicians and the wise men of Egypt by your wisdom and your pious deeds. The daughters of princes cast their jewels before you to draw your eyes upon them when you passed through the land of Egypt, but you did not look their way, and therefore were you made the father of 2 tribes. The magicians and the wise men of Egypt sought to defame you before Pharaoh and slander you, but you set your hope in the Almighty. Therefore, may he who appeared to me as El Shaddai bless you and grant you fertile soil and much cattle. May the blessing your father gives you now, and the blessing that his fathers, Abraham and Isaac, gave him, and that called forth the envy of the great of the world, Ishmael and Esau and the sons of Keturah, may all these blessings be a crown upon the head of Joseph and a chain upon the neck of him that was the ruler of Egypt, and yet diminish not the honor due to his brethren.
Wow. So it's basically saying that Joseph is going to get all the blessings of the forefathers, of the ancestors, which is why it says in the blessing surpasses the blessings and is part of that chain of blessing that goes from Abraham, Isaac to Jacob, and now to Joseph. And because of that, it bypasses those other people. It bypasses Ishmael and Esau. It bypasses the sons of Keturah. So what we're left with is, again, you're the one who's really blessed. And because you've been blessed, you've been able to make it thus far. But of course, by implication, by extension, that blessing will always be on you. And it's different for you. You're going to be blessed in this way. It's not over. There's another paragraph here.
The slander of which Jacob spoke referred to what Potiphar had said of Joseph before Pharaoh. He had complained, saying, "Why did you appoint my slave, whom I bought for 20 pieces of silver, to be ruler over the Egyptians?" Joseph had then taken up his own defense, saying, "When you bought me as a slave, you committed a capital crime. Only a descendant of Canaan may be sold as a slave, and I am a descendant of Shem and a prince besides. If you will convince yourself of the truth of my words, do but compare me with the likeness of my mother Sarah that Pharaoh had made of her." They brought Sarah's likeness, and verily it appeared that Joseph resembled his ancestress, and all were convinced of his noble lineage.
So that's a midrash that we didn't get before, which you got to hear. And I mean, before, when we talked about Joseph being in the being revealed and being brought before the Pharaoh, we didn't get this. This is wild, because what it says is that when Sarah was there generations before in the land of Egypt and was brought into Pharaoh's house, they made a statue of her. Wow. And by the way, we know the Egyptians did this. There's one of the great statues and one of the most beautiful pieces of art of all time is in the museum in Berlin, the bust of Nefertiti, which people still are amazed at because of its amazing artistic style. They had these busts, and so they had one of Sarah. Sarah has, maybe it's the Nefertiti one, who knows? The Sarah one is, they brought it out and it looks so much like Joseph that they knew that he was telling the truth. So here's another great link, by the way, between women in Jewish history and Jewish text, that the women play a very important role here, which is that they establish a continuity and in this case help Joseph with his case, which is that he was not supposed to be a slave in the first place. So you can say I was a slave, but I was not supposed to be a slave. And because of that, you made a mistake in the first place of buying and selling me as a slave. So treating me as a slave. I never should have been a slave, which again, they don't hear that. And I mean, they don't get proof of it until that moment. So, so Joseph's blessings here really do seem to go backwards more than forwards, in the sense that the blessings that Joseph gets seems to explain his history up until now. There definitely seems to be in the Bible, when we read about it in this chapter 49, it really, the blessings of Joseph really do seem to explain how do the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, in particular the tribe of Ephraim, how did it get to be so powerful? And it got to be powerful because Joseph is blessed, and Joseph is Ephraim's father and is the ancestor of this very, very powerful tribe of Ephraim. By the time of the rabbis, Ephraim is completely non-existent. It's done. It's gone. And not only that, as we read, Ephraim is the ancestor of the king Jeroboam, who's the one who revolts against David and his family, not David, but his grandson Rehoboam, and leads the northern tribes in opposition and creates a northern kingdom. So the tribe of Ephraim ends up kind of going off the rails, at least according to the rabbis. And so Joseph, we can look backwards and not be in any problem because Joseph is clearly blessed. But going forwards, we got a little bit of a problem. But there are other places, I will tell you, we have seen it and we will see it again, that Joseph does have a descendant who is also a Messiah. That there's a Messiah ben David, there's a Messiah the son of Judah through David, a Messiah from Judah, and there's also a Messiah from the tribe of Joseph, a Messiah ben Yosef. And so that Messiah is also sometimes seen as a necessary Messiah, an additional Messiah, a Messiah, if you will, who is maybe the ancestor or his descendant. Joseph's descendant is also a descendant of Judah, that they're mixed together now. But this idea that maybe Joseph is necessary, his descendants are necessary for our final vindication. But now we get to the youngest son, the final son in the blessing, which is Benjamin. So this is, these last two paragraphs are about Benjamin. So I made them so you could see both. Okay.
The blessing that Jacob bestowed upon Benjamin contains the prophecy that his tribe would provide Israel with his first ruler and his last ruler. And so it was, for Saul and Esther both belonged to the tribe of Benjamin. Likewise, Benjamin's heritage in the Holy Land harbors two extremes. Jericho ripens its fruits earlier than any other region in Palestine, while Bethel ripens them latest. In Benjamin's blessing, Jacob referred also to the service in the temple, because the holy place was situated in the territory of Benjamin. And when Jacob called his youngest son a wolf that ravens, he was thinking of the judge Ehud, the great scholar, a Benjamite, who conquered Eglon, king of Moab, and also he had in mind the Benjamites that captured their wives by cunning and force. Again, if he called Benjamin a wolf, Judah a lion, and Joseph a bull, he wanted to point to the three kingdoms known as wolf, lion, and bull, the doom of which was and will be sealed by the descendants of his three sons. Babylon, the kingdom of the lion, fell through the hands of Daniel of the tribe of Judah. Media, the wolf, found its master in Benjamin, in the Benjamite Mordecai. And the bull, Joseph, will subdue the horned beast, the kingdom of wickedness, before the messianic time.
Okay. So there's a lot there. And I think we'll be finishing with this today. So Benjamin is the last son and the youngest tribe, if you will. But it's also in some ways the most important tribe. I'm not going to go in order here, but let's talk about what goes on here. First is Benjamin is important because that's where Jerusalem is. Jerusalem is in the tribe, within the tribe of Benjamin. So even though Benjamin is a small tribe numerically, he is the tribe where Jerusalem was chosen to be the holy city. So he's very important. We also know that the tribe, even though it's a small geographically, it's not a large geographical area. What's interesting about it is that from both ends of it, from Jericho to all the way to Bethel, which is again the Jewish heartland. This is really today again the area we call Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, whatever you want to call it. This is the tribe of Benjamin. This is the area that was kind of like the heartland of the Jewish people, the area of Jerusalem and its environs, which go all the way out to Jericho. There's huge microclimates in that area, and it's strange because you think, well, it's not that big of an area. I mean, you're talking about 20 miles, not even 20 miles, about 20 miles north south, and yet, wow, look at how many different climates you have there. The extremes. So Benjamin is kind of on the extremes. And there is this sense with Benjamin that like things will get really good with them or they'll get really bad. And we have this strange story in the middle of the book of Judges. Read about it in chapter 19, how the tribe of Benjamin is almost completely wiped out by the other tribes. The other tribes go to war against Benjamin. Benjamin thinks it can beat everybody else. I mean, literally all the other tribes go to war against Benjamin, and they're almost wiped out. The tribe is almost wiped out. So this is before King Saul. This is just before King Saul. And so we read this weird story that the Benjaminites are almost completely destroyed. And what are they able to do as kind of like so that they don't disappear? They're able to go out and capture women and marry them and continue their tribe. It's a weird story. It's all weird. But it's weird that this tribe almost gets wiped out by the other tribes. Again, Benjamin just thought they could beat everybody. And they do for a while. I mean, Benjamin is like a really tough tribe. But they're given permission to basically go out and steal women so that they can repopulate themselves. And that's why it says Benjaminites captured their wives by cunning and by force. It's in the Bible. I mean, it's not, the rabbis knew it was a weird story. It was an extreme story. It was not the way things should be. And the story really does stand out in the book of Judges and really the whole Bible as a story that's really problematic. The story starts with a guy who comes to a city in Benjamin, and the Benjaminites basically replay the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in their own town. The man's concubine gets raped and killed. They cut up the body, they send it out to the rest of the tribes, and rather than taking responsibility for what they do, the Benjaminites decide, you know what, you don't like what happens, come fight us, and they almost get wiped out. It's a crazy story. It's a tough story, and it's not, the rabbis are definitely not extolling the virtues of Benjamin, but it's in the Bible, and so they have to deal with it. We also know that Ehud is one of the judges, is from the tribe of Benjamin, and he kills the king Eglon. He kills the king of Moab, by the way, while he's on the toilet. Seriously, if you think that this story isn't in the Bible, go back to the book of Judges. Actually, read the book of Judges. It'll blow your mind. That's where Samson is in the book of Judges. This story's in the Benjamin story's in the Judges. The story of Ehud is in the book of Judges. Lots of interesting stories in Judges. It's kind of the Wild West times of the Jewish people where anything could go and usually does. Yeah, but he stabs Eglon in the toilet. And so Benjaminites are known to be cunning, and they can they're not people you want to turn your back on. However, the rabbis also point out something really interesting too, which I think you can see as the theme here, which is that women are important in the history of the Jewish people, and that the rabbis have no issue talking about women, Sarah, Deborah, and now Esther. Esther, according to the book of Esther, Esther and Mordecai are from the tribe of Benjamin, which means that we know where they are during the time of the exile. After the exile, there are still tribes that we identify. Benjamin is that tribe. And Esther and Saul are connected. So Saul is problematic. Obviously, he tries to kill King David, and he has the kingdom taken from him, and he's killed by the Philistines. But he was the first king of the Jews. And there was a time when Saul was the Messiah. There was a time when Saul was favored and was loved. And Esther is from his tribe. And there's a direct line between Esther and Saul. And this is not the only place where we get this. We read Esther a long time ago, the Midrash, so I don't expect you to remember. But they connect Esther to Saul. They connect her back. Some of the things that Saul was known for, including his modesty and his grace, his royal bearing, if you will, she has that. She has that. But of course, so does her uncle / cousin, right? So does Mordecai. Mordecai is important because he's also a descendant of Benjamin. He will help us defeat the Persians. Though he didn't really defeat them. He's there to help us so that the Persians don't destroy us. But he's one of those descendants of Benjamin that is able to help us. And who's another one? Daniel. Daniel is from the tribe of Judah, but he is like the tribe of Benjamin, a special tribe. And so he's the one who gets to defeat the Babylonians. And who's the other really special tribe? Joseph. And that is represented by the descendant of Joseph, who will be the final Messiah. This is a midrash which gives us the Messiah, the son of Yosef. And more importantly, this is the Messiah that we have yet to see. The Messiah who is going to defeat the he's going to defeat the Romans, or the ones who took over for the Romans. Depending on when this midrash was written, and they didn't say, and they specifically don't say who their enemy is, because their enemy is their enemy right now. The kingdom of wickedness. And these people will be defeated by the final one of these big three: Judah, Benjamin, and Joseph. The bull, the lion, the wolf, and the bull. And the bull, again, represents, each one of these is represented by their kingdom. The kingdom is the kingdom that they defeat is the representation of who they are. So they match up. The lion against the lion, the wolf against the wolf, and the bull against the bull. So who's the bull? The Romans. Or again, the descendants of the Romans, whether it's the Byzantine Empire or whoever it is that was seen as the inheritors of the Romans, who they refer to simply as the kingdom of wickedness, which again is what you call your enemies when you don't want to call them out by name. So again, this was written at a time when the Romans, or again, the Byzantines, were in control. And so the hope is that that descendant of Joseph that's out there, the final Messiah, the final descendant, will be the one who brings it in at the very end, at the end of days. So again, there's some themes that we read today. The fact that these blessings are about bigger things, but that women also are part of these big things, that women are part of the history and the future of the Jewish people, that women, well, wouldn't say the future, because it doesn't talk about the messiahs being women, but it does talk about the role that these women had to play in order for this to happen. And so they were definitely part of the story, which I guess by extension you could say, why wouldn't one of the messiahs be a woman? Because Esther and Sarah and Deborah were all necessary leaders during this time too. I mean, to get us to that time, whatever that they're mentioned. Again, this idea that these blessings are about the time yet to come, that the blessings of Jacob are not about even the immediate future or the future of the Jewish people for the next, well, we read all the way to Esther, folks, right? So Esther is 200 BCE. We're talking about today. We're talking about the fact that people still read these chapters of Genesis, and they still use the Midrash to try to decode how these tribes are going to play out in the final end of days. How will we be redeemed through this blessing? Again, it's hinted at by that line, which is that, Jacob says this is about the future, right? This is, it said right at the beginning that this is that this is to befall you in the days to come. That, I hate to say it, but those two words, Acharit Hayamim, the words Acharit Yamim, we have it translated here as days to come. The word Achar means to come, but it could also be translated as the end of days. And so it almost, again, was the rabbis had to do this, because by the time that they're writing, there's so much focus on that concept of Acharit Yamim, the end of days, the days to come, that they had to do it. They almost didn't have a choice. When the Bible said, when Genesis says something that's you have to, it's that pregnant with meaning, that it's that juicy for let's get apocalyptic here. They didn't have a choice. And so that's why this last section becomes so prophetic and so apocalyptic. And again, it ends the book of Genesis. One could say that the purpose of it originally was to bring the tribes together. By the time the rabbis get to it, it's to give people hope that the future will be better, and that if you just can decode it, if you can just see, like Jacob had it and then it went. At the last minute, as he was about to reveal the secret, God wouldn't let us have it. We couldn't have it. God didn't want us to have it. But it's there. And trust me, it's in there. And it really does reflect the longing of a people to have number one, to have an answer for why they have to deal with such service. Why do we have to deal with such problems? But it also has to deal with this belief that one day it will be okay. It will be better. And they didn't give up on that hope. So it did lead to, people eventually having a religion based on, in Christianity, and based on this hope that there will be a redemption. And it is, again, it followed along that. So there's a direct line between this and the beginnings of Christianity. And again, we could say what people hope for the future. Again, we hope that the future will be not one that will be filled with violence and with bloodshed, and it'll be a redemption that we don't need to go to battle for. But again, we shouldn't give up hope that there is going to be a redemption. So we don't talk about it as much in non-Orthodox Judaism, but it is a big part of who we are. Having hope, whatever that means. So we'll wrap up there, and we will have class next week, God willing, and we'll get into the last minutes of Jacob's life and the last parts of Jacob on this world. But as you can see, it goes on for a little bit. It's not the end. It's not yet the very end, because again, we have Joseph's death, and we have the rabbis use this part of Genesis to continue to extract amazing lessons. So anything else, everybody? Otherwise, we're going to, but the end is, you can see it. The end is nigh. we're going to, remember, next week we'll hopefully be reading about what we learned about Jacob as he departs. So,
Rabbi, once we're done with Genesis here, are we going to go on to Exodus?
Yeah, well, we haven't looked at it yet, so I would like to look at it. I'd hate to not finish the job of, for a few reasons. One of them being, Mike, that there's some great midrash on, really wonderful midrash on Moses' birth, which I don't want to miss.
I thought we started with Exodus a few years back.
We started with the with after the Exodus. So we actually started up with Moses in the wilderness. That's where we started. We didn't start with the very, very beginning. We started with Exodus, but later on, actually we started in Numbers after Exodus. So there's a couple things we haven't done midrash on. We haven't done the midrash on, though we've seen some of it. We haven't done the midrash on Moses' birth, and we also haven't done the midrash on the plagues, which are interesting. Some interesting midrash on the plagues. So we will definitely, I'd like to read that because it's got some good lessons in it. And again, of course, it's not what you think it is, right? You think that this is about what do you tell your children before you die. It's not what the rabbis have for them. They have some really mystical and prophetic lessons about the future of the Jewish people. You almost kind of wish.
The plagues now seems very appropriate.
Yeah. It'd be nice if people still worked off of that too, but look, I mean, we don't really have much on the other tribes anymore, but there's this idea that we could read Jewish history as it's been unfolding even into our own day through the lens of the Torah, through this is pretty cool. And I wish people still did it. Just like I wish people still, for some reason during the Middle Ages, people had no issue making biblical characters look like their contemporaries. I wish we did that today too. That's part of the midrash. It's part of what makes it come alive and help us read the Torah through our own lenses to make this contemporary. So I wish people still did. It is one of the treasures that we don't use it. We've stopped doing that. So it'd be great if we did. All right, everybody. It's good seeing you all, at least video.
Rabbi, that's another cause you could promote. If you need one.
I wish. I'm thinking. I think about it all the time, and there are people who do some interesting things with midrash. But as a matter of fact, one of them is local, and I'm trying to figure out how to. I know they're doing it by Zoom right now, but I think it'd be better to wait till we're not in Zoom land anymore. Rabbi Shauna Brinjagard Bialik, who used to be at Abat Shalom, who lives in Castaic, her and her husband are doing something called paper midrash. Isaac, her husband, is an artist, and they're doing it. I know they're doing it by Zoom right now. They're doing some of their teaching, but it's really cool. They do really, really neat artistic midrash, and there are people who've done it over the years. Have used art for midrash, but yeah. Anyways, everybody, stay good. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.